Podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and today we are in March. I am in an uncharacteristically optimistic mood. No particular reason. I think maybe I just got some good sleep last night. And now I feel like the world, it's fine. Like it's not gonna be great. Let's be clear. All right. Like unless you're a billionaire, the world is not great for anybody, but it's gonna be fine. And I think fine is the best that we can do, at least for the foreseeable future. We could upgrade to all right, and that's the scale for me. Fine, and then all right, and then not bad, and then can't complain. So we're way over, all right? Like it's fine. But I think it's possible if maybe we could get to all right. And that would be an improvement. All right. Anyway, who knows how I'll actually feel when this episode comes out? Because again, I record ahead, and things could be way worse by the time this episode comes out. And if they are, we kind of did it to ourselves. I think at the end of the day, everything that happens that we don't like is a collective result of all of the decisions that we've made along the way. And just got to do better. Got to make better decisions. I tell that to my son all the time. Make better decisions. And he doesn't, because he's 2 and he's just a tiny little idiot. And that's fine. He'll get there. But, decision making, not his strong suit. Anyway, all of that is to say, it's Weird Bag number 24. Weird Fun Bag number 24. Got to get the title right. 3 stories, as always. They're generally not related, but I just put them together because they're fun in a way. So we are looking at the London beer flood, Baron George von Bothmer, and our first story will be of the Southcottians.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
So we begin with Mary Harker, who was born in Yorkshire, England in 1768. At age 13, she began working as a servant before moving to York and working as a dressmaker. After she was charged with burglary as a teenage girl, which, granted, like a 13 to 14-year-old girl in the 1760s is basically like a 30-year-old woman in today's, maybe even like 50, with how mortality rates were and life expectancies were back then. Anyway, it's not beside the point. She was charged with burglary, and so she fled to Leeds, where she began gaining a reputation as a fortune teller and a quote-unquote wise woman. A wise woman as like a 15-year-old. Okay. She married John Bateman in 1792 and quickly returned to her life of crime by committing robberies, but always escaped prison by bribing the witnesses who had gotten her arrested in the first place. Now, in 1806, Bateman joined the Southcottian movement. Now, who were the Southcottians? That's the whole point of what I was introducing them as in this episode. So here we are. They were formed by Joanna Southcott, who was born in April 1750 in Tailford, England. As a child, she grew up working on her family's dairy farm before working as a domestic servant in Exeter after her father died. In 1792, Southcott joined the Wesleyan Church where she became convinced that she had supernatural gifts and began speaking and writing exclusively in rhymes. Like she's like a hobbit or something. I don't know. Like, that's weird. You said, that would get annoying real fast. I can't even think fast enough to do a bit right now, but that's gotta be annoying. Like just a creepy old lady who spoke only in rhymes. You know, just like, oh, hi, Joanna. I'm going to do it anyway. Hi, Joanna. How are you doing today? Oh, hello, dear. The morning brings new rounds of fear. There is the messages of the Lord to hear. Don't be shy, dear. I don't know. But like just weird stuff like that, right? And just very off-putting. You know, anyway. Soon after she did all this, she proclaimed that she was the woman of the apocalypse as referenced in Revelation chapter 12. Southcott eventually made her way to London and worked for William Sharp, who was an engraver, and began selling paper seals of the Lord that ensured the owner's place among the 144,000 people allegedly predetermined to be elected to go to heaven. Now, let's set aside the absurd idea that in the course of thousands of years of human history, we still have not gotten 144,000 people to heaven yet. That's like heaven is some kind of exclusive webinar that only has a limited amount of seats. That joke makes sense for a very small portion of this listening audience. But like, also, the Wesleyans didn't even believe in the concept of the 144,000 people. That was the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they weren't even formed until 1870s in the United States. So Southcott, she's just like off doing her own thing at this point. Now, back to Mary Bateman. She, soon after joining the Southcottians, she perpetrated a hoax known as the Prophet Hen of Leeds, in which a chicken laid eggs with the words "Christ is coming" written on them. Bateman produced 3 of the eggs and then charged super gullible onlookers a penny each to view them. However, her hoax was quickly discovered after someone was like, yeah, it's pretty impossible for someone to just write that on an egg naturally. So they took the hen from her, and then when the chicken like subsequently started laying normal eggs, they're like, yeah, we knew you were lying. She then confessed that she had written the message herself, and then shoved the eggs back up inside the chicken, which that seems like an unnecessary move in the process. Just come out of the whatever the chickens are in. I wanted to say pen, but I didn't know if that was right. Anyway, you're coming out of the barn. Just carry the eggs yourself with the words. You don't have to shove them back up in the chicken to do. Anyway, none of these people make sense. After the chicken fiasco, Bateman was approached by William and Rebecca Perigo for help. Rebecca Perigo was suffering from unexplainable chest pains, probably because she had just turned like 30 and was about to die. And so Bateman reasoned that she had been put under a spell, because obviously that's what it was. Bateman then offered to cure the spell by feeding the couple pudding that was laced with poison, which, again, we all know this, but that's not how you cure spells. And also, the couple didn't know they were about to be poisoned. By 1808, Rebecca had died, and then William Perigo accused Bateman of poisoning his now dead wife, as well as defrauding them for 2 years by getting them to pay for charms and cures that didn't work. Duh. Police quickly searched Bateman's home and found poisonous ingredients, as well as personal belongings from other victims that she had been killing along the way. Her trial lasted all of 11 hours, and the jury returned their guilty verdict in only a few minutes. When Bateman heard the guilty verdict, she then claimed that she was 22 weeks pregnant, which is an oddly specific number, but okay. Which, again, if this is true, would have spared her from the death penalty. Now, this woman is a known con artist and a habitual liar at this point. So, to make sure that she wasn't lying again, the judge added 12 married women to the jury. I don't know why they had to be married. England. but added them to the jury to conduct a physical examination of Bateman to make sure she wasn't lying. Well, guess what? She was lying. She wasn't pregnant at all. Bateman was hanged on March 20th, 1809, and after her execution, her body was transferred to Leeds General Infirmary, where the hospital charged 3 pence for people to come and view her corpse. Surgeon William Hay then spent 3 days dissecting her body in public, because that's a thing that just used to happen. You want to be curious about how the body works? Hey, we're going to do a public dissection. Just come on down to the courthouse and see this criminal that we've killed splayed open and filleted like a fish. And like, I don't know why we don't do that anymore. I mean, maybe they do in medical school and we just don't talk about it, but just like, man, like some criminal who's donated their body to science, you got to donate it to science now. That's the liberals did that probably. And so, but like, that would be so great, man. Like, some murderer gets executed and he has donated his body to science. And then again, this goes into my pay-per-view executions and stuff. Let's have a pay-per-view dissection so you can tune in, stream the dissection, just some murderer getting cut up, and you learn about how bodies work, because they'll make it educational. I don't know, that'd be fun. Anyway, sometimes, like, for all of the great things that we have in society now, we've really let some really good stuff fall by the wayside. I think we should bring them back. Strips of Bateman's skin were tanned into leather and then sold as magic charms to ward off evil spirits, which, how do you justify that purchase, right? Like, oh yeah, I bought a piece of this woman's leathery skin, which is now a magic charm. Oh, was this woman like a really powerful, magician or witch? Like, did she do? No, she was like a pathological liar, and she poisoned people to death because she's told them that she was curing their spells, but she really wasn't. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Her tongue was purchased by the governor of Ripon Prison, and then 2 books were covered with the rest of her skin. That used to be a thing. Like, you just buy body parts and keep them as decorations. How cool would that be? If you can just say, yeah, I bought, some serial rapist's ball sack, and then I just thump it it's just hanging off my car mirror, and I just thump it at people who cut me off in traffic just to show what I can. I don't know. That'd be great too. Anyway, meanwhile, while all of this was happening, the Southcottians were still being weird. I know we haven't really focused on them, like the rest of this story is about them. In 1814, Southcott claimed that she was pregnant with the new Messiah, known as Shiloh from Genesis 49:10. Never mind that Southcott was 64 years old at this point, which is a miracle she's still alive. She was going to run with it anyway and declared that her due date would be October 19th. Well, guess what? October 19th came and went, and Shiloh was nowhere to be found, probably because she was never pregnant to begin with. But to cover for this, some of Southcott's 100,000 followers that she had at this point began spreading the word that she hadn't given birth because she was busy being in a trance. Okay, in reality, Southcott actually suffered from a rare disorder that made her appear pregnant, which then, I guess, allowed her to trick her followers and herself into believing as much. Southcott herself died on December 26, 1814, though her followers kept her body around under the belief that she would be resurrected. Well, when her body started to decompose, then they decided to bury her. It was like, maybe she's not going to come back. Although most of her cult disbanded at this point, a small group did remain in place. And over the next 70 years, various pockets of Southcottians made minor headlines, mostly as self-proclaimed prophets with their own silly predictions. A follower named Anne Essam left a large sum of money for the, quote, printing, publishing, and propagation of the sacred writings of Joanna Southcott in 1844. And by 1881, a small group of followers in Chatham had disguised themselves, or had distinguished themselves, by having absurdly long beards and remarkably good manners. Like, they're kind of like the Amish of England, where it's just like, you know who they are, and they're just like, they act completely differently. Southcott herself left a sealed wooden casket of her prophecies with instructions to only open it during a time of national crisis and in the presences of the 24 current bishops of the Church of England. And here's what's crazy. There were attempts actually made to open the box during the Crimean War in the 1850s and then again during World War I, which that's World War I, I think, would be a good time to open up the box. In 1927, psychic researcher Harry Price took ownership of the box and then had it opened, only to find a few random, unimportant papers, a lottery ticket, and a gun. Southcott's followers immediately began claiming that Price's box was a hoax and that the real box was just still out there somewhere waiting to be found. By the 1960s, the Panacea Society, which was this later version of the Southcottians, started a new movement to open the true box and claimed to be holding it in a secret location that would only be revealed if the bishops of the Church of England agreed to a meeting. They didn't. They also claimed that Southcott had prophesied that the Day of Judgment would come in 2004, and that if the box's contents were not studied beforehand, they would all be unprepared for the end of the world. None of that's obviously happened. Today, there is, I think, one church in England, and then there's also one in Michigan, randomly, that follows Southcott's teachings. Even more, the church in Michigan once fielded a baseball team that featured future Hall of Fame pitcher Satchel Paige. By all accounts, Southcott's mystery box, the quote-unquote real one, still has not been opened. Moving on to the early 1800s, the Moe Brewery was one of the largest breweries in London, producing nearly 40,000 barrels of porter-style beer at a time. On October 17th, 1814, storehouse clerk George Crick noticed that one of the iron bands around a vat had begun to slip. But iron bands regularly slipped off the vats. You had to replace it. Crick wasn't super concerned. He told his supervisor that the 20-foot tall vat, which was holding more than 3,500 barrels of beer, was having a problem, but was told that, quote, no harm whatever would ensue, and to simply write a note to one of the brewery's partners to have it fixed at some point. Well, guess what happened? An hour later, as Crick was standing on a platform 30 feet from the back of the warehouse, while holding the letter to the brewery partner regarding the slipping band, by the way, the vat inexplicably burst. The force from the blast broke the release valve on an adjacent vat and destroyed several other standing barrels of porter. And within seconds, as many as 323,000 gallons of beer were released, destroying the rear wall of the brewery and sending a 15-foot wave of alcohol down New Street in the St. Giles Rookery, known at the time as, quote, a rendezvous of the scum of society. So, it's in the bad part of town. 2 houses along New Street were immediately destroyed, and 2 others were badly damaged. In one of the houses, 4-year-old Hannah Banfield was having tea with her mother and another child when the wave of dark beer burst through the walls, sweeping them all out into the street and actually killing the 4-year-old girl in the process. Inside a neighboring house, a wake was being held for a recently deceased 2-year-old Irish boy. The wave of beer burst through that house, killing the boy's mother, Anna Savell, and 4 other mourners. So, just this wall of beer has now killed 6 people right out of the gate. Over the next 2 days, stories began surfacing of people rushing to the area to collect the spilled beer and then later dying of alcohol poisoning, because obviously. The brewery's watchmen began charging admission to view the remnants of the destroyed vats, and several hundred people actually went and paid to view it. In all, 8 people died as a direct result of the flood, and the families of the victims laid the bodies out in nearby yards for those same onlookers who went in to go pay to view the damage to go by and look at the dead bodies that were the result of it. A lot of people did donate to the families to cover the funeral costs, so that's good, I guess. However, because the coroner's inquest deemed the flood as an act of God, the Moe Brewery was not forced to pay any compensation to the victims' families. However, the lost beer and damage to the building cost the company £23,000, which is more than £1.4 million in today's money, which similar numbers, I think, which forced them to petition Parliament for an excise in which they recovered 7,250 pounds and prevented them from going bankrupt. The brewery did eventually shut down more than 100 years later in 1921. Our final story here of George Davis, who was born in 1952 in Santa Monica, California. For some reason, 42 years later in 1994, because the rest of his life story does not matter, George was formally adopted by his 85-year-old aunt, who was a former fashion model who had married a German baron, thereby technically making George himself a baron, according to whatever silly rules dictate that sort of thing. I don't understand any of it. Although his aunt died soon after the adoption, George had already officially changed his name to Baron George von Bothmer zu Schweigerhof and was officially actually recognized by Germany's government as such. Now, over the next decade, George inherited and collected a variety of treasures such as the crown of Puyi, the first wife of China's last emperor, precious gemstones from Marie Antoinette's mother, pre-war letters from Albert Einstein, signed copies of Mein Kampf. The fact that he had multiple is weird. Mahatma Gandhi's letter opener, and more. George also claimed to have strong political ties and influence back in Germany since his godfather, Otto von Habsburg, was the creator of the European Union. And despite all of that, George and his wife moved to Victoria, British Columbia in 2000 and then swindled the Anglican church women of the Diocese of British Columbia out of a 3-story Tudor house for $1. Like, I don't know how you do that, but like, I don't know, this church group owned this house, and then this baron, which is whatever, George, gets it for $1 somehow. I don't know. When the diocese figured this out and filed a lawsuit, George called the charges outrageous and reiterated the claim that his family lineage had long stood for honesty. The family lineage that he didn't even become a part of until he was like 42 years old. Anyway, the case settled out of court a couple of years later with George and his family then moving down to Oregon, where he began working as a licensed therapist. There, he met a man named Bill Sickens, and the two went into business together. Now, as it tends to happen, the relationship soured, and by 2012, Sickens filed a complaint to the Oregon Board of Psychology examiners, claiming that George was faking everything, including having a therapy license, probably because he was. Then, on Easter weekend 2012, police were called to George's home, where they found George covered in blood, claiming to have been robbed by two men. According to George, the two men had tied up him and his family and stolen all of his priceless treasures. They took Gandhi's letter opener from him. Priceless. Priceless and worthless. Not synonymous, but whatever. George also said that the only person who could have been behind it was his disgruntled former business partner, Bill Sickens. Detective Lee Ferguson was assigned to the case, and he called Sickens, who had since moved back to his parents' house in Reno, Nevada, after struggling with an addiction to painkillers. And the more that Ferguson dug into Sickens' life, the more he began to realize that Sickens was just kind of like this derpy homebody that completely lacked the mental and financial means to mastermind a criminal act like the one that George was accusing him of. And that's concerning on a variety of levels. Remember, these two went into business together as licensed therapists. And now you've got this police detective who has come to this determination that one of the people, Bill Sickens, in this business was such an incompetent, socially awkward homebody who did not have the mental ability to mastermind a robbery. And then you had, obviously, George, the other therapist in this, who, is really leaning into his German nobility that he just kind of inherited on accident. A search of George's home revealed very little evidence of a grand struggle, and many of the highest value items like artwork, glass, and his 1997 Jaguar car remained untouched. Many of George's associates that Ferguson spoke to didn't really understand how George had come to obtain all of his collections and believed that he was a con artist. And by all accounts, especially given George's history of frivolous lawsuits and other schemes, police began to think the attack had been staged. However, at the same time, the FBI and several police departments in the Portland area were also dealing with a series of violent murders and robberies. They were looking for David Ray Taylor, who was this felon that was currently out on parole for the murder of a 21-year-old gas station attendant back in 1977. Taylor was very outspoken in his beliefs that young boys could be groomed to kill women painlessly while slowly torturing and brutalizing male victims. So he's obviously the perfect candidate for parole. Although he had been on parole for the last 8 years, Taylor was already wanted again for a series of rapes, assaults, harassment, and strangulation on top of the bank robberies that he was committing. Taylor had recruited a group of younger boys to help him with those robberies, in which he would escape on a bicycle to a getaway car outside the range of any security cameras, and then use a relay system to transmit the stolen goods to various safe houses. After his 9th bank robbery, however, authorities began to close in. As Ferguson also continued to work separately on George's case, he received a tip that actually connected David Ray Taylor to George's robbery. Ferguson even had George pick Taylor out of a photo lineup along with one of Taylor's accomplices. Now, while police worked to get arrest warrants, Taylor coerced 2 of his accomplices to fake a fight at a bar, luring a witness out to the parking lot and convincing him to give her a ride back to her apartment. Once they arrived, Taylor jumped out and forced another accomplice to kill this woman. And then after the murder, the group dismembered the body and tossed it into a shallow grave near Eugene. 6 days later, Taylor was finally arrested, and when investigators searched Taylor's girlfriend's apartment, they found various items that belonged to George, shocking literally everyone involved, including George, who probably still believed that Bill Sickens was behind it. Taylor eventually confessed to everything, including the robbery of George's home, and he explained that he had actually learned about George's story and alleged wealth, but thought that George was either lying about it or was like another thief like he was. Taylor then made it a point to make sure that everyone knew that he didn't like liars and wanted to make George pay. Like, he's on this like weird Dexter High Road thing now, even though he's a terrible human being. Like, it's okay for him to like brutally murder and rape women, but don't lie to him. Oh, no, that's bad. Don't lie. Oh, but you know, I mean, like I can kill somebody. Like, that's fine. Especially women. Gross. Hate women. But are you going to lie to me? No. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. George, on the other hand, he still refused to believe that Taylor was acting separately and that Sickens had nothing to do with the entire ordeal. While Taylor was given the death sentence for the murder, George then filed a lawsuit in 2016 alleging that several stolen items, including a silver brooch, a Fabergé egg, and more, still had not been returned, and it was all because Bill Sickens was working with the dirty cops in the Lake Oswego suburb of Portland to steal his priceless treasures. It didn't matter that George had already been awarded a $110,000 insurance settlement for the lost heirlooms, nor did it matter that an appraiser had already concluded that none of his treasures were even real in the first place, but they were just dollar store costume accessories. Uh-oh. So now, like, this dude is all over the place. And he's like, I don't know if he's like, he's probably still genuinely a con artist, but also, I don't know, maybe he's an actual idiot. Where he's going around, he's like, yeah, I've got Mahatma Gandhi's letter opener and signed copies of Mein Kampf. And then, you know, an actual appraiser comes through and was just like, no, dude, this is just like a letter opener you get at the dollar store. You signed those copies of Mein Kampf yourself. That's not even Hitler's handwriting. All that stuff. To this day, George believes that he was the victim of an international conspiracy and that David Ray Taylor was simply a fall guy used by Bill Sickens and corrupt police departments to rob him of all of his heirlooms. It's also still a little unclear whether or not George is actually connected to any sort of German nobility. There we go. Weird bag number 24 in the books. Let us recap and see what we learned this week. What did we learn? Number 1, Joanna Southcott believed that she was the woman of the apocalypse and then built this little cult. They were relatively harmless as far as cults go, but then she had like this mystery box and no one was allowed to open it unless all the bishops were in the meeting with them, and the bishops don't care about this at all. But whatever, there's some of them still around and believe it, and someone out there still has her old box and gonna have to open it someday, or else we're not gonna be prepared for the end of the world. Number 2, in 1814, a couple of vats exploded in a wall, a tidal wave of porter beer, which isn't even that good of a beer. Like porter, it's not as rich as a stout, but it's worse than like a brown ale, or even like, I don't know. It's not great, but a wall of it rushed down the street in London and killed 8 people, which is crazy. And then number 3, Baron George von Bothmer, con artist or like actual part of German nobility. I don't think even he knows at this point, but most people believe that he's a con artist and just got a bunch of stuff from a costume shop and started convincing people that he had these priceless treasures, and he didn't really. What did we learn? Next week on Our Weird World, it's going to be a fun episode. We are looking at the story of Glenn Helzer and the Children of Thunder. It's kind of a stretch to call them a cult because it was only like 3 people. But, oh man, this guy was a nut job of all nut jobs. And it's Mormon, so you know it's going to be silly and ridiculous. So come on back next week for that story. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends about the show and keep it weird.
This is a podcast